He thought he had buried the past 6 feet under, but it showed up wearing a suit and smiling at someone else's wedding. If irony had a crueler face, it would have been this moment. Daniel Carter hadn't planned on being here long. Just another polite evening of shaking hands, congratulating the bride and groom, slipping a gift into a box, and maybe sneaking away before the dance floor became unbearable. Weddings were torture for someone who had been left behind. The music always sounded like ghosts. But then he saw him, Ethan Montgomery, the boy who had once held his hand under bleachers, who had once whispered promises of forever under the August stars, the boy who had left him without a goodbye, shattering the fragile dream they had built together. And now he was here, looking devastatingly familiar, like a song Daniel thought he'd forgotten but could still hum in his sleep. The champagne glass trembled in Daniel's hand. For years, Daniel had poured his heartbreak into music. Every lyric, every melody was a confession Ethan would never hear. He had imagined confronting him, screaming, demanding an explanation, but standing here, across a sea of clinking glasses and flashing smiles, Daniel couldn't even breathe. Ethan's eyes caught his. It was just a flicker, a spark, collision. But in that second, the years between them collapsed, and the weight of everything unsaid pressed down on Daniel's chest like a storm waiting to break. The reception hall was a dream in warm amber light, the smell of roasted meat and vanilla cake thick in the air. Conversations buzzed like static, couples twirled on the dance floor, and yet Daniel felt like he was underwater, watching everything move around him in slow motion. Ethan was surrounded by people laughing, nodding, exuding that effortless charm he'd always carried. He looked older now, sharper in his tailored suit, but his smile still carried the softness that had once disarmed Daniel completely. And then Ethan started walking toward him. Daniel's throat tightened. Every step Ethan took was a countdown. By the time he stopped a few feet away, Daniel's carefully built walls were already cracking. "Daniel," Ethan said, his voice a quiet thunder. "I didn't know you'd be here." Daniel forced a smirk, though his chest was on fire. "Well, I wasn't planning on it either. Guess we both lost the lottery tonight." Ethan winced. Still the same sharp tongue. "And you?" Daniel shot back. Still the same perfect smile. "Tell me, do you practice it in the mirror? Or does it just come naturally with breaking hearts?" It was cruel, and he knew it, but the words flew out before he could stop them. Because Ethan's presence hurt. It was easier to sting than to bleed. For a moment, Ethan said nothing, only studying Daniel with those hazel eyes that once made him believe in forever. Then, softly, "I deserve that." "Damn right you do," Daniel thought. But the ache in Ethan's tone, the flicker of regret in his gazite was dangerous. It threatened to unravel him. Music swelled in the background, couples drawing closer on the dance floor. Daniel felt like an intruder in someone else's fairy tale. He wanted to leave, but his feet refused. Ethan shifted, his voice barely above the hum of the song. "How have you been?" Daniel laughed bitterly. "Great. Wrote some songs, sold some records, filled some silence with noise." "You?" "I've been." Ethan's words faltered. "Trying to live with myself." The rawness of it caught Daniel off guard. It wasn't the answer of a man who had moved on. It was the answer of someone haunted, and that terrified him more than anger ever could. They ended up outside on the patio, away from the music and the flashing cameras. The night was crisp, the stars cold and distant. Daniel leaned against the railing, trying to hold himself together while Ethan stood beside him, silence heavy between them. Finally, Daniel broke it. "Why?" Ethan closed his eyes. "Because I was a coward. Because I thought loving you was a fire that would burn us both down. Because the world back then wasn't ready, and I wasn't brave enough to fight it." Daniel's chest tightened. The words were both a confession and a wound reopened. He wanted to scream, to ask why Ethan hadn't trusted him enough to face it together. But instead, all he managed was a whisper. "And now?" Ethan turned, his face illuminated by the soft glow of string lights. "Now I don't care if the world burns. I just care if I lose you again." The air between them vibrated, charged with longing, regret, and a love too stubborn to die. Daniel's heart raced. He wanted to push Ethan away to protect himself. But his reckless, aching soul leaned closer. And for the first time in years, he let himself hope. That night was only the beginning. Because when two hearts collide after years of silence, the universe doesn't let them walk away easily. And Daniel Carter was about to learn that sometimes the hardest songs to write were the ones life forced you to live. The morning after the wedding should have been easy. A hangover, some leftover cake, a polite goodbye, and Daniel would be free. That was the plan. But life, as usual, had other intentions. Change of plans, the bride chirped, clinking her mimosa glass against Daniel's coffee mug before he could even process what she was saying. We rented the whole lakeside cabin for the weekend. Everyone's staying. You're staying too. Daniel froze, spoon halfway to his mouth. I've got work. Cancel it, she said with a mischievous grin. You can't run off yet. You're family. Family. That word always twisted in Daniel's chest. Family had been the very thing he'd lost when he chose to love Ethan, and the very thing Ethan had abandoned him for. And then, as if summoned by memory, Ethan walked in. Shirt sleeves rolled up, hair damp from a shower, looking every bit the ghost that wouldn't leave. He stopped short when he saw Daniel at the table. His lips parted, but no words came out. Great, just great. Daniel shoved his spoon into the mug a little too hard. Looks like I'm stuck, he muttered. The bride, oblivious to the storm under the surface, beamed. Perfect. You two can catch up. Catch up. As if 7 years of silence could be bridged by small talk about the weather. The lake cabin buzzed with chatter as the day unfolded. Guests lounged on Adirondack chairs. Some swam, others kayaked. It should have been peaceful, but Daniel carried tension like an anchor. Every time Ethan drifted near, laughter on his lips, Daniel's heart tightened. He tried to keep his distance, but fate or maybe cruel design kept throwing them together. At lunch, there was only one empty chair, right next to Ethan. On the hiking trail, Ethan somehow ended up walking beside him, their steps falling into that old, familiar rhythm. By the bonfire at night, when someone asked Daniel to play guitar, the instrument was handed to him before he could refuse. And Ethan sat across the flames, listening as though every note was a confession. Daniel sang a song he hadn't performed in years. The lyrics bled with longing, with the ache of someone waiting for a love that never returned. The night air carried it like a secret to every corner of the circle, but only Ethan seemed to understand the words weren't just music. When the last chord faded, silence lingered longer than applause. Ethan's gaze burned through the firelight, and Daniel had to look away. Later, when most guests had gone inside, Daniel slipped down to the dock, guitar in hand, seeking solitude. The moon painted the lake silver, quiet ripples catching the reflection of stars. You always did like the water, came a voice behind him. Daniel stiffened. He didn't need to turn to know. Don't you have someone else to bother? Ethan stepped closer, his presence brushing against Daniel's defenses. I didn't mean to bother you. He hesitated. That song. Was it about me? Daniel let out a bitter laugh. Not everything revolves around you, Ethan. But some things do, Ethan pressed gently. Daniel set the guitar down with care, though his hands trembled. You don't get to ask that. Not after the way you left. Silence. Only the water lapping against the dock. Finally, Ethan spoke, voice low. I thought I was protecting you. Daniel turned sharply, anger flaring. Protecting me? From what? From loving you? From a life we could have had. Ethan's jaw tightened, eyes glistening in the moonlight. From the hate. From the whispers. From your career being ruined before it even started. I thought if I let you go, you'd be free. Daniel's breath caught, fury and heartbreak colliding. Free? Do you have any idea how long it took me to breathe again after you vanished? I would have fought for us, Ethan. I would have fought until my hands were bleeding. But you never gave me the chance. Ethan stepped closer, desperation in his voice. I was scared, Daniel. I was 18 and terrified. I made the worst mistake of my life. For a long moment, Daniel said nothing. He wanted to throw Ethan's confession back at him, to bury the past under rage. But the pain in Ethan's voice wasn't something that could be faked. The truth was, Daniel had never stopped loving him. And that was the cruelest part. The days at the cabin became a dance neither of them could escape. They orbited each other, pulled by gravity they couldn't deny. Sometimes it was unbearable, the brush of shoulders, the accidental meeting of eyes. Sometimes it was intoxicating laughter that slipped out when Daniel wasn't looking, memories resurfacing when Ethan mentioned a song they once shared. But it was dangerous, too, because every moment of closeness cracked open the old wound a little wider. One evening, as rain pattered against the cabin roof, they found themselves alone again. Everyone else had retreated with board games and drinks, but Daniel lingered near the fireplace. Flipping through sheet music he pretended to study. Ethan stood in the doorway watching. "You still do that," he said softly. Daniel glanced up. "Do what?" "Hide in music when you're hurting." The words were a blade wrapped in tenderness. Daniel wanted to deny it, but his throat closed. Ethan crossed the room, slow, careful. "Daniel." Daniel swallowed hard, fingers gripping the sheets. "Don't." But Ethan didn't stop. His hand brushed the paper aside, his touch grazing Daniel's. The contact was electric, a jolt straight to his chest. "I can't pretend anymore," Ethan whispered. "I still love you." Daniel's breath hitched. The world seemed to hold still, the rain, the crackle of fire, even his own pulse. He wanted to believe it. God, he wanted to. But belief was dangerous. Belief had broken him before. "You don't get to say that," Daniel whispered, voice trembling. "Not unless you're ready to prove it." Ethan's eyes burned with resolve. "Then let me." For the first time in 7 years, Ethan reached for him not as a boy running from fear, but as a man willing to stay. And Daniel, trembling, let him. That night was not a fairy tale. There were no perfect declarations, no sweeping promises. Just two men sitting close by the fire, their words halting, raw, imperfect. But it was real. And maybe, for now, that was enough. The storm came the next morning, not just in the sky, but in the room. Someone had posted a photo from the wedding online. Just a harmless shot. Daniel playing guitar by the bonfire, Ethan sitting across from him, their eyes locked in a way that betrayed years of silence. But the comments beneath were cruel. Old high school classmates, former bandmates, anonymous strangers. Words like faggot and coward and still hung up on him littered the page. Daniel found the post before Ethan did. His stomach dropped, rage boiling hot and cold at once. He knew this world. He'd lived it. But seeing Ethan's name dragged into it again, it made his blood hum with fury. Ethan walked in, phone in hand, face pale. He didn't need to say anything. Daniel knew. "It's happening again," Ethan whispered, voice breaking. Daniel stepped closer, heart pounding. "No, not this time." But no, Daniel's tone was steel. "I've spent too many years letting fear dictate my life. I'm done hiding." Ethan's breath shook. He looked at Daniel like he was the only steady thing in the storm. "And if they destroy your career?" Daniel smiled, faint but fierce. "Then let them listen to the music I'll write about us. Because for once, it won't be about loss, it'll be about love." That night, Daniel performed again by the fire. Not because anyone asked him to, but because he needed to. Ethan sat beside him this time, no longer across the flames. The song was new, born in the last hours of chaos and confession. It wasn't perfect raw lyrics, unpolished chords, but it was honest. He sang about two boys who had been afraid, about time lost and hearts broken. He sang about fire and water, about cowardice and courage. But most of all, he sang about forgiveness, about how love, when it was real, didn't die. The guests listened in silence, some with tears glistening, others with quiet awe. And when the last note faded, Daniel reached for Ethan's hand in front of everyone. This time, Ethan didn't let go. The following weeks weren't easy. The online backlash grew louder. Some fans turned away. But others more than Daniel had dared hope sent messages of support, stories of their own battles with love and identity. One letter in particular stuck with him. "Your song gave me the courage to come out to my dad. Thank you for being brave so I could be too." Daniel read it aloud to Ethan, who smiled through tears. "See," Ethan said softly, "we're not alone anymore." And for the first time, Daniel believed it. Months later, they returned to that same lake. Not for a wedding, not for a reunion, but just for themselves. Daniel sat on the dock with his guitar, Ethan leaning against him, their legs tangled, the sunset painting the water in shades of gold and rose. "Do you regret it?" Ethan asked quietly. Daniel turned, pressing his lips to Ethan's temple. "Not for a second. The only thing I regret is all the years we lost." Ethan closed his eyes, leaning into him. "Then let's not lose any more." Daniel smiled, his heart steady at last. "Deal." And as the night wrapped around them, they knew. The past had hurt them, the world might still try to, but here in this moment they had won. Not by escaping, not by hiding, but by choosing each other again. The stars came out, reflected in the lake like 1,000 promises. Daniel strummed a gentle melody, one he would later turn into a song the whole world would hear. But tonight it belonged only to them. Two boys who had grown into men, two hearts that had broken and healed, and a love that had survived everything: fear, time, distance, even themselves. Thank you for listening. If you find it interesting, please like and subscribe to follow the next stories.